Today, we will hear 3 stories from members of our congregation. Stories of folks who have pulled themselves up out of an abyss or pulled themselves back from the brink of despair and are here to answer the question, the burning question that I always have for any of you resilient souls. How did they do it? I believe the stories we share here and in community are salvific, by which I mean when we share our personal stories of survival, they can save our lives. They can save maybe your life. VanWitsen, Jason Delaney, and Dana Taylor will share deeply this morning from their own lives. We are honored to receive this precious gift of their powerful vulnerability today. These are indeed the shortest days, and so it's a good time to discover how we might light the way for one another.
Everyone knows firsthand that life is messy and painful, beautiful, and unpredictable. The endless practice is keeping our heart open to the whole of it. On February 22nd, 2017, my husband of 50 years died. Gary was my best friend, the father of our children, the one who encouraged and comforted me. We were a musical duo for 30 years, co-therapists for 20 years, a creative team producing video and audio recordings. He was gone, and I felt my life was also gone. When I wasn't sobbing, my angry voice said, "Give me my life back." I had never lived alone, played solo, or unstuck a car in 3 feet of snow. I had a lot to learn. While wrestling with the thought that my husband was lost, like a child in a blizzard, actually, I was the one who was lost, desperately searching for the answer to the complexity of death. How could a person be physically here in a moment and then be gone? Gone where? Oh, I hear I have small ears. Okay, Jeep has been very patient with me, and I didn't know I had this disability, actually. I have learned how to ask for help. All right. I had no idea how to deal with the pain of this loss, how to begin a new life, how to build a new world. Would this pain ever go away? Journaling had been a good part of my life, and so I decided to journal every day, the first day after his death. That way, I could look back, and I could see that I was progressing, that I was finding my way out of the despair. Having been a hospice volunteer, I knew I needed to accept my own unique grieving process, to be kind and patient with myself. But where to begin the healing that I so desperately needed, I just couldn't think or even function. Being aware of this, my grief counselor from hospice gave me some advice. She said, "Ask yourself, what do I need or want in the next moment just the next minute, not the next day or week or year, just the next minute. That minute is where the healing begins. So how could I stay in that minute? I was so tired from my grieving and had so little energy. I was wasting that low energy with longing and yearning for the past or fearing the future. Because of that, there was no energy left for facing the here and now, the next minute. The key for healing is the willingness to stay in that moment, even if it felt terribly sad. To have the great courage to experience the pain in that moment and to trust that I was in process and I would not always feel that badly. It's so important that the journey through grief, you need to know it's life-changing. It's a time of transformation, a time when we will evolve. The grief journey has much to teach us if we're willing to trust the process. Until we experience a loss, we have no idea how strong we are. We don't realize how resilient and adaptive we are. A broken heart also sees the world differently. When we experience deep hurt, our capacity for compassion grows. In the beginning for me, there was only the pain. Totally exhausted and numb with the endless sobbing and raging, I yearned to feel peace again, to feel restored. Finally, a tiny little voice came to me in that lonely space. It begged me to remember joy, and I craved it. But how could I find that joy again? A year after Gary died, a conversation helped me discover the source of the healing power for me, the healing power of that joy. On a gloomy, wintry evening, a friend of mine was sitting with me in my living room. The wood-burning stove wrapped us in peaceful warmth. She compassionately listened to me, as she had so many times. Gently interrupting me, she said, "You were so blessed to have those 50 years with Gary. Some people never have that kind of love, that amazing creative life you had together. Can you feel grateful for what you had instead of the sharp pain of the loss?" She stood up, lovingly hugged me, and left. Looking into the fire, something had shifted inside me. Gary's breath would never again create a tune in his Irish whistles. His love was still here, but his physical presence was gone. I was here. I hadn't touched my harp since his death. Moving to it, I placed my fingers on the strings and tentatively began to play alone. Vibrations of healing music flowed into my broken heart, and grief tenderly spilled into gratitude. Tears of sorrow and joy intermingled. I had finally found the place where I could revisit a memory, and the pain was smaller than the gratitude. The pain was smaller than the gratitude. And gratitude lights the path to joy.
I remember sitting in a parked car, the snow falling around us on the side of some rural Pennsylvania road, Cheryl sitting next to me as I sobbed in the passenger seat, terrified to face my family on Christmas Eve, 2002. I remember coming home from the police station, driven home by a housemate I barely knew in the early hours of the morning in October of 2000. I remember the summer of 1999, sitting on an exam table at my childhood pediatrician's office. The nurse practitioner asked me some real honest questions about how things were going. My parents sitting, anxious in the room. I answered, and I couldn't look them in the eyes. I remember the feeling of handcuffs on my wrists, way harder, more rigid than I would have imagined. How it was impossible to get comfortable in the hard plastic chair that I was cuffed to. Waiting after I had just called my mom in the middle of the night, asking her to come get me from jail, our oldest son. I remember every day waking up, realizing that I had slept through class, sometimes hungover, sometimes still hallucinating from the night before. I remember learning what academic probation meant after I finished my freshman year with a 1.4 GPA. I spent a year at home, and not every night, but almost every night, I thought about how they would all be better off without me. As I wandered the dark and quiet house alone with my brother and my sister and my parents asleep upstairs, I thought that I was such a selfish coward because I couldn't stop making their lives worse. The vast majority of the worst moments of my life all happened in a 3-year time span. From my 17th birthday until about a month before I turned 20. And a good number of the people that I knew during that time didn't make it to 25. I got very, very lucky. My story is way, way simpler than a lot of people that I know. In May of 2000, I was fortunate enough to be sentenced to spend 30 days of court-mandated residential treatment at Pyramid Healthcare in Altoona, Pennsylvania. By the time I got there, I had started to turn things around in fits and starts. My counselor, Julie, helped me understand that I was just as capable of thinking myself into trouble, into justifications for choices that I would regret, as anything else. In every room, a sign, "Keep it simple, stupid." I spent 30 days in those rooms, learning that I didn't know nearly as much as I thought I did. I heard stories of men who had continued down a path that I was headed down, stories of boys who had endured unimaginable trauma. And I tried to comfort them in their grief and hold them accountable to their best selves. I made my bed every morning. I saw a guy that I knew well get sent directly to jail for a hard foul during basketball after lunch. I gave and I got a lot of hugs. I put on 10 pounds worth of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I got my depression under control, and I found God, and I lost God, and I said, "This too shall pass," under my breath, probably 2,000 or 3,000 times. I smoked a lot of Newports. When I got home, nothing had changed except my disposition, my way to be in the world. I learned how to show up to my life. It's still so hard to do sometimes, but I know what it looks like. I know what it looks like when you don't show up. And I learned what it looks like when you show up for yourself and when you show up for other people. The hardest part in the car on that rural Pennsylvania road, that Christmas Eve 22 years ago, the snow coming down, a year and a half out of rehab, the hardest part was that I knew that I was different, but no one else did yet. A reputation is a really hard thing to rebuild. And so I wept. And Cheryl got me coffee and a honey bun. And I took some deep breaths. And then I showed up. If there's nothing else that I can do, I can show up. That is the faith that I learned.
In a dream, you saw a way to survive, and you were full of joy. In a dream, you saw a way to survive, and you were full of joy. The artist Jenny Holzer created this phrase as part of her survival series, in which she explored the dangers of everyday living. It is the everyday living, isn't it, that we struggle sometimes to get through, to make meaning of, and to maintain our balance in as we journey down the path of our days. In my own life, the tools that I have found that have helped me hold on to hope in the face of my challenges have sometimes felt as though they have come from some divine and ancient wisdom showing up in my dreams or in messages that I receive like magical gifts. More often than not, though, the tools in my coping kit have come from reaching out to others and drawing on the wisdom of those around me. When waves of grief have knocked me off my feet, or as I struggle to care for and support the generations above and behind me, or I faced the months and months and months of a painful divorce, I looked to those who could share what they had learned with me. Sometimes that has been in person, one-on-one, or in groups. Sometimes that has taken the form of stories, music, poetry, art. And I collect it all, knowing that these are my immeasurable treasures. These are, as the band Flogging Molly says, what keeps me from sinking the boat I built to keep afloat. I recently attended a gathering at the Carter Center of faith leaders who were there to discuss the need for an interfaith coalition in our area that would be focused on mental health. It was an inspiring gathering overall, but one thing that I heard that day really stuck with me. A woman who had been working with young adults on resilience skills said that a young man who was quite excited to recognize some new options open to him thanked her and said, "I couldn't use a tool I didn't know I had." I couldn't use a tool I didn't know I had. And so I will share with you a tool that I use every morning when I wake up. I do this at the best of times and the worst of times, and if I can't sleep well, I will do this in the wee hours and not wait until my regular rising time. It is a 4-part meditation/gratitude practice that I've kind of stitched together from things I have learned along the way. If you like, you can do this with me right now too. Feel free to close your eyes if you're comfortable, if you choose. First, check in with your body. How are you feeling right now? Relax into any place that needs it. Second, think about your day yesterday. What made it unique and unrepeatable? What did you hear, see, do, read, or learn for the very first time? Third, how did you make connections with others yesterday? Was that in person? Or did you find that others influenced your life in a helpful way, even though you might not ever meet them in person? Were you helpful to others? People? Animals? And last, what is something that you are grateful for today? Right now? What do you give thanks for this very minute? You can come back to the room and open your eyes. That was the short version. But I find that this practice contains all the things for me. Every tool, every lesson, every way to survive that fills me with joy. Whatever you gather to get through your days, whatever tools you find or create that help you build your boat and light your way, I encourage you to remember to share them with others. This is how we truly grow and nurture a beloved community that glows with the spark of every precious soul. Blessed be.
Now comes the sacred season, the wintry season of hope against all odds, when we share stories of human survival, both ancient and new. And we will need these stories to alight on our hearts, to chart our path out of our own depths, to be like the menorah, like the North Star the shepherds followed, like the Kinara, the Moravian star, the lamps we carry to light the way forward for each other. Take these lights with you and keep them close when you need them most. May these stories of resilience and hope bless you and light your way forward.